Well, George, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And Sumedh, of course, thank you so much for having me this morning. It is an absolute pleasure to be with all of you. I have spent the last 8 years of my career at Morgan Stanley in the private sector, but I will tell you, my 15 years at the National Security Agency as a federal employee, coming back to the DC area and getting to spend today with all of you really feels like coming home. So first and foremost, just a big thank you to all of you for the service that you provide for our nation every day. I am incredibly grateful. My heart remains in Fort Meade, Maryland, not far from here. So again, thank you for having me. As George mentioned, I spent the first 15 years of my career at the NSA. I had a few different jobs there, like many of you, moved around, did a lot of different things, spent a couple of years running the NSA's counterterrorism operations mission, using technical means to get onto the devices used by terrorists, their smartphones, their tablets, their laptops, with the goal of reading their email, listening to their phone calls, geolocating them. And then, of course, my favorite part of the job, what we referred to as kinetic remediation. You guys know where I'm going with that. Quite satisfying. Pretty stressful job, though. For the ladies in the audience, this is when I started coloring my hair. Definitely took a couple years off of my life. So then spent 3 years in London helping the British get ready for the 2012 Summer Olympics. We all watched Paris last year. That was great. But you guys all know that those French feds are very happy to have those games behind them, because every 4 years when the Olympics rolls around, the eyes of the world get laser focused on that city, that country. And in London in 2012, that was certainly true. We had the Chinese coming after the clocks and timers at the Olympic venues. We had the Russians coming after the databases that house the Olympic drug testing records, which, yes, makes perfect sense now, made no sense to us at the time. Just all kinds of miscreants looking to rub some grit in the eyes of the British. I was thrilled to see those games go off without a hitch, and then to come back to Fort Meade, where I spent my last 5 years running the NSA's cyber exploitation operations mission. So basically America's professional hackers. In that job, I would travel around the country trying to recruit America's top computer scientists and computer engineers. Of course, these kids were getting big six-figure offers in big tech and big finance. And you all understand my challenge, right? Trying to get them to come work for government peanuts instead. So what was my pitch? Well, the one thing I could offer them that no one else could was the opportunity, frankly, to do something that would have been illegal anywhere else. And for a particular ilk of young person, you know these types, that opportunity to no longer be beholden to the Computer Fraud and Abuses Act, quite an alluring proposition. So we'd bring these kids in, we'd give them 18 months of highly classified training, and we would conduct hundreds of operations every day, hacking into the networks of the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, stealing the secrets out of their networks, giving them to our policymakers, our warfighters, all with the goal of keeping the United States and her allies safe. Now, I tell you, this was a dream job. You guys will appreciate this. As a technologist, I got to work pretty much every technology on the planet, including a bunch of things you can't even buy here in the United States. So think indigenous Iranian firewalls, cracked versions of Windows, things we would have diplomatically pouched in to reverse engineer. Also a dream job because the intelligence we brought back, we used to call it eye-watering intel, right? You know that stuff that when you think about the fact that you're going to put it on the president's desk the next day, brings a little bit of a tear to your eye. Incredibly proud of the work that we did in my 15-year tenure, remain incredibly proud of the work the intelligence community does to protect and defend us every day. But I will tell you, there are some things about my job as the quote-unquote queen of the hackers at the NSA that I don't miss. Some management challenges that are really unique to that workforce. Top of the list, hygiene. Guys, I gotta tell you, these young men, and they were almost exclusively men, very bright, very patriotic, very weird, and not very shower motivated. It got to the point where I actually had shower caddies in my office at Fort Meade. Folks would come in the morning, we'd give them a little bit of the sniff test. Is Joe ready for human interaction? No. Let's send him down to the showers. The other thing I don't miss, huge problem with gaming addiction. I knew nothing about the symptoms of gaming addiction back then. Now, as the mother of an 18-year-old son, I'm an expert. But I will tell you, think about it this way. You have an employee who is late to work, that's a problem. But what happens if you're late to work at the NSA? I've got to send the police to your house. I've got to work with the assumption that you're on a plane to Moscow because, right, that happened. So we were hosting PlayStation interventions, Xbox confiscations. We're getting girlfriends and sisters and mothers involved. This was a problem. At Morgan Stanley today, I can tell you people generally show up to work on time. They smell pretty good. My day job in that sense has improved, but holy cow, do I miss my days at the NSA and the incredible work that those folks are doing. So these last 8 years, running cybersecurity for a large bank, what are we going to talk about this morning? Well, first, I want to give you a sense of my sleepless nights. We in cybersecurity do not sleep well. The second we're sleeping well, we know it's time for a new job. So none of us, listening to all the experts you're going to hear from today, none of us are going to be sleeping tonight. Then I want to pivot to what I worry about for all of you and for the constituencies you support. What am I most worried about in 2025? And then we'll close today with some best practices. Sumedh and I have been working together for many, many years now. Obviously, I am passionate about this topic. And this partnership that we're bringing together here today, I think is the very crux of what we all need to be doing together. So with that said, why do I not sleep in this job? Top of my list of sleepless nights these last 8 years, without a doubt, North Korea. Why? North Korea up against staunch international sanctions, no domestic economy to speak of, yet trying to fund a wildly expensive missile and nuclear program. So how are they doing this? How is North Korea funding its government in 2025? Well, they've essentially made it a major plank of their national strategy that they're going to fund their government by hacking into banks and stealing money. Right? That old adage, why rob banks? It's where the money is. We just never expected to see a nation take this on as the source of their gross domestic product. But that is exactly what North Korea has done. And what's unfortunate for every one of us in this room playing defense is that the North Koreans have been very successful with their bank hacking strategy. This is in no small part because they have resourced it at a very high level. Estimates now have it at 12,000 people within the North Korean government who have bank hacking as their full-time job. And those ranks just continue to grow. Now, I tell my kids all the time how fortunate they are that they did not grow up in North Korea. My teenage daughter says that having me as a mom feels like living in North Korea, but this is not fair. The reality is, if you grow up in North Korea, On your 11th birthday, you are administered an aptitude test. You score best and brightest on that North Korean intelligence exam, and you are immediately on-ramped into the bank hacking program. These kids moved away from their families into dormitories, raised, trained to be hackers from the age of 11. Also unfortunate, North Korea, really good at this. You will have all read the book, listened to the podcast about the Bank of Bangladesh heist. This now continues to go on. So in that case, North Korea hacks into the Central Bank of Bangladesh, carts off close to $100 million over a long weekend. But what not everyone knows or appreciates is that the North Koreans were a typographical error away, literally a spelling mistake, from that being of nearly $1 billion. That's an eighth the reserves of the nation of Bangladesh, this close to gone over a long weekend. And this was not a one-off for North Korea. Again, this is their strategy for funding their government, so much so that last year the United Nations published a report supporting the allegations of 27 countries around the world, all of whom are asserting that the North Koreans have gotten into their central banking apparatus. Now, if that weren't bad enough, these last 3 years, with the war in the Middle East, my number one source of sleepless nights has been Iran. Look at Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. What is the common denominator, both spiritually and financially, behind those entities? It is Iran. Now, Iran, of course, is not hacking us for money. They've got plenty of money. They are hacking us because they recognize that cyber represents an asymmetric threat. Sailing an aircraft carrier into New York Harbor, that would be a decade-long billion-dollar project. Building a nuclear weapon, thank goodness, has proven to be very challenging. So what have the Iranians done instead? Well, in many cases, they've literally put 40 guys in the basement of a building in Tehran and managed to wreak havoc on U.S. industries. This is what we've seen over the last 3 years. But the thing that I am most worried about for all of us now, these nation states, sure, but the sea change in cybersecurity over the last 3 years is the rise of cyber criminal syndicates. These are traditional organized crime rings that are now conducting crime at a level that we frankly couldn't have imagined 5 years ago. How has this proliferation occurred? Well, no surprise, with the availability of artificial intelligence and the democratization of very advanced nation-state level cyber tools. This has effectively lowered the barrier to entry to being a quite sophisticated cyber actor, and it has increased the scope, the scale, the velocity of the cyber attacks we are all seeing to levels, again, boggle the mind. Now, how bad has this problem become? I'll put it to you in these terms. If you put all of these cyber criminals in the world in one country, that economy would be the third largest on the planet. You'd have the United States, China, cybercrime, 11 trillion in revenue for these cyber criminals just last year, and those numbers are only continuing to increase. This means that all of us need to recognize the scale of the threats that we are up against. Now, what do I worry about most for all of us? For me, 2025 has been the year of the 3 R's. Russia, ransomware, now resilience. Talking about what we can be doing about all of this. Now let's start with Russia. So Russia, again today, last time I checked, is our enemy again. I know we've been going round and round on that, but I'll ask you all the question. You've been in this space with me. When you look back at this war between Russia and Ukraine, and you think about Putin and his very potent cyber army, how many of y'all think that Russia's cyber army is just sitting this war out? Yeah, not so much. The reality is that what the Russians are doing, and I say this begrudgingly, both as a patriot and as a former civil servant, the Russian cyber strategy for this war has been ingenious. What the Russians are doing is hiding in the noise of all of that cyber criminal activity we just discussed. So if I tell you that now 70% of the malicious cyber traffic we see on the internet is criminal in nature, is financially motivated, the Russians have recognized that by obfuscating their nation-state level cyber attacks to look criminal in nature, they can avoid escalation, they can avoid attribution. The last thing the Russians want is another full frontal slap in the face colonial pipeline style attack. Rather, they are taking very much a boil the frog approach, slowly ratcheting up the heat in ways that no one is talking about. So I want to give you an example of what these nation-state level cyber attacks have looked like in financial services, but I want you to think about this through the lens of the agencies and constituencies that you support. What might this low-burn cyber activity look like in your backyard? So, ma'am, I'm going to ask you a question in a second. I'm putting you on notice. Brace yourself for impact. If we went back in time to before the start of the war with Russia and Ukraine, if I were to ask you, say it's your typical American retail bank, so your Bank of America, your Wells Fargo, your PNC, what percentage of the accounts being opened every day were fraudulent? What would you guess? 25% is a wonderful guess. Spot on. So, typical day 3 years ago, 25, 30, even 40% of the bank accounts being opened in the United States at big retail banks every day were fraudulent. Sounds crazy, right? What was going on? Well, there are these huge human farms in places like Bangladesh, Ghana, Sierra Leone, massive warehouses filled with people sitting next to big stacks of stolen identities. And what they're doing is opening a bank account in your name at Bank of America, opening another account in your name at Wells Fargo, linking those two bank accounts and harvesting the 75-cent micro deposit that banks send each other when you link an account. So those of you from Treasury, you know this well. When you set up those external linkages, those banks send those tiny ACH payments back and forth to verify both ends of that transaction. Now, 75 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but if you are harvesting this hundreds of times a day across hundreds of people, the money really adds up. There are, in fact, entire communities in Bangladesh that are living off of the harvesting of these micro deposits. You'd also ask the question, why weren't the banks doing anything about this? And the reality is that it would have cost more than 75 cents to prevent the fraudulent account from being opened. So they were viewing this as a cost of doing business, a retail shrinkage problem, until the Russians took notice and decided to use this trend for very different purposes. So we now fast forward 3 months before the start of the war with Ukraine. It's January. The big banks, working with many of your brethren, we get together 3 mornings a week to talk about what we're seeing in the environment, what we're worried about, that public-private collaboration, very pronounced in financial services. We get on this call, Bank of America is suddenly reporting 60% fraud. What's going on? We're starting to become alarmed. Now it's February. Wells Fargo is reporting 75% fraudulent account opening. This is becoming a real issue. Now it's March. Tanks are rolling across the border into Ukraine. My best friend at PNC of 20 years calls me on a Saturday morning, says, Rachel, we got to get the gang together. We're at 95% fraud. They had lost $14 million in 2 weeks. They had basically become a criminal enterprise, and they decided to take the unprecedented step of taking their new account opening flow off of the internet. So to open a bank account at PNC, you were going to have to walk into a brick and mortar branch. You had to exist as a real person. Now, what was this really about? It took us 3 months and a great deal of partnership with our 3-letter agencies in this neck of the woods to figure it out. But I can see from the looks on some of your faces that you've already cracked the code. While this attack was very expensive, it was not financially motivated. While this attack was certainly a crime, it was not conducted by a criminal group. All the other banks quickly followed suit, took their new account opening flow off of the internet, and for 3 weeks in the United States, if you wanted to open a bank account, you had to walk into a branch. What was this really about? Not intended to cost money, but instead intended by the Russian government to make it virtually impossible for millions of Ukrainian refugees to move their money to the safe harbor of American bank accounts. Not criminal in nature, but rather a bona fide denial of service attack designed to stymie the flight of capital from Ukraine while the Russians tightened the noose. Think about what this could look like in your backyard. This brings us to our second R, ransomware, far and away the most lucrative form of cyber attack today, and in the vast majority of cases, caused by a combination of humans behaving badly and of infrastructure and architecture that is not well managed. So much of the conversation we're having today. These ransomware attacks, not the pop-up on your laptop asking for $500 in iTunes gift cards that you would have gotten 5 years ago. Now all what we call triple extortion scams. Hackers gonna start by getting into your environment. That chink in the armor, that unpatched server, that link, that download, that attachment. Hacker gets in and the first thing they're gonna do is siphon off all of your crown jewels from a data perspective. This could be your constituent data, your employee data, source code, proprietary information. Once they have stolen everything you care about most, they are then going to help you come into the office on a Monday morning and find all of your systems down. Back-end database has been encrypted. Production environment is corrupted. Front-end website has been defaced. Your computer's all blue screen of death. They will then call you, the first of 3 very spooky phone calls. Happy Monday. You've noticed that all of your systems are down. We hackers would love to help. We just need $500,000 in this cryptocurrency equivalent in this wallet in South Africa by 2 o'clock. And if it's not there by 2 o'clock, make it $600,000. They will ratchet up the ransom until you decide to pay. Now, of course, just like all of you, we're going to tell you not to pay. What happens when you pay a ransom? You have now told the world that you are an entity that will pay a ransom, and the hackers will just keep coming back. City of Baltimore, near and dear to my heart, has now paid a ransom 6 times to the same hacking group that are getting in through the same unpatched vulnerability. It's to the point now where the city of Baltimore has actually baked ransom payments into their annual budget. This is not the place that we want to be. But maybe you pay. The irony is that you will then have the best customer service experience of your life. These hackers will be on the phone with your IT people. They will be decrypting your data, debugging your router. I had a client tell me 2 weeks ago that her computers had never worked better than the day after her ransomware attack. And these guys are super reputationally sensitive. They will actually send you a survey afterwards. How was your ransomware experience with us? They want you to tell your friends and neighbors, yup, we got hacked by the Bulgarians. It was delightful. What great guys. But of course, we don't want you to pay. The hackers are not done with you. They will call you back on Tuesday and say, it was a pleasure doing business with you yesterday. While we were in your environment, we stole all of your data. And if you don't want us to sell it all on the dark web, we're going to need another $500,000. And now we know that you are both willing and able to pay. Maybe you pay, maybe you don't. But here's the kicker, guys. The hackers have figured out what everyone in industry now knows. You do not want a one-time payment, right? You want a continuous revenue model. These hackers, in exchange for now a monthly fee that you will pay in perpetuity, they will agree to keep your systems up and running. They're now part of your IT department. They will agree not to sell your data on the dark web tomorrow. Honor amongst thieves here. And the wild part, guys, this is actually mafia-style protection money, because they will also agree to help protect you from other hacking gangs that want to come in and do the exact same thing. I am sad to report that I now have hundreds of clients who are not happily but are quite willingly paying one Eastern European hacking gang to better protect them from the rest. The brave new world we are living in 2025, which of course brings us to resilience and the nature of our conversation here today. Utterly crucial that we as cybersecurity professionals are doing everything we can to instill the resilience of our platforms, our applications, our networks, our systems. And so everything that we are going to talk about today, that we are going to discuss, existential to doing what the nation and our constituents expect of us. In my case, it's what my shareholders, my clients, my leadership expects, but I cannot foot stomp or underscore enough just how important this conversation is. Thank you so much for the opportunity to spend this morning with you. You are going to have a great day. I'm really looking forward to the rest of it. Thank you.